What if the very children you raised with your blood, sweat, and sacrifice turned against you and threw you out of their lives, calling you nothing more than dead weight? Would you crumble under the humiliation, or would you rise from the ruins and prove them wrong? Tonight's story is not just about betrayal. It is about resilience, destiny, and how broken places can sometimes hide the greatest treasures. Stay with me until the end, because this story carries a powerful message you won't forget. Margaret Wilson was not born into wealth or privilege. She grew up in a small Midwestern town where life was tough and every meal on the table was earned through hard work. Her hands told her story better than any book could. Wrinkled, scarred, roughened by decades of scrubbing floors, carrying heavy crates, and sewing through long nights just to make a living. She had no children of her own, but life gave her 3 orphans in need of love: Ethan, Claire, and Daniel. She adopted them not out of pity, but out of pure love. To Margaret, blood didn't make a family, love did. She raised those children as her very own. She clothed them with the money she earned through sweat, gave them her name, gave them a home, and most importantly, gave them the warmth of a mother's love. Never once did she let them feel like they had been abandoned. Every sacrifice she made was for them. But kindness is not always rewarded with gratitude. Sometimes, the people you love the most become the ones who hurt you the deepest. It started with whispers, words Margaret wasn't supposed to hear. Ethan's friends from his fancy university laughed behind her back, saying she was holding him back. "Why do you still keep her around? She's nothing but a burden. She doesn't fit in with your lifestyle." At first, her children ignored those comments, even defended her. But slowly, Margaret began to notice a shift in their tone, in the way they looked at her. Their glances carried impatience instead of love, irritation instead of respect. One Sunday afternoon, Margaret prepared a feast. She roasted chicken, baked cornbread, and cooked green beans, the kind of food that reminded her of her childhood. She set the table with care, humming softly, her limp slowing her steps, but not her spirit. She thought this meal would bring her family closer, but instead, it broke her world apart. Ethan, the eldest, stood with his arms crossed, his face hard. In front of his siblings and their friends, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Why do we even let her stay here? She's just dead weight." The words landed like a blade to Margaret's chest. She looked at him, waiting for him to laugh it off, to say it was a joke. But Ethan's face remained cold. She turned to Claire, then to Daniel, hoping one of them would defend her. They stayed silent. One shifted uncomfortably. The other avoided her eyes. Their friends smirked and added fuel to the fire. "If it were me, I'd have kicked her out already." Laughter filled the room, cruel and careless. And in that moment, Margaret's children, the ones she had given everything to, chose shame over love. That very night, they told her to leave. No second chances, no discussion. Just cold stares that no longer saw her as a mother, but as a burden. The neighbors saw her that evening, shuffling down the driveway with a single bag in her hand and tears in her eyes. "After all she's done for them," whispered one woman on the corner. "Kids these days let pride eat their souls," another replied. But Margaret kept walking. She refused to let them see her broken. In her pocket was all she had left, $1,000 in cash, her entire life savings tucked into her trembling hands. That first night, Margaret sat at a bus station, her bag under her arm, clutching the money like it was her very breath. The cold concrete pressed against her back. The air smelled of old rain and gasoline. Strangers passed without a glance, and she realized how invisible the world makes those who have nothing. By morning, her body ached. A janitor sweeping nearby looked at her and whispered to his coworker, "Another one tossed out after outliving her usefulness." The words burned, but Margaret didn't flinch. She had learned to carry pain behind her eyes. For days, she wandered the town, searching for shelter. Rent was too high, shelters too crowded. She stood outside bakeries, the smell of fresh bread twisting her empty stomach. But she could not bring herself to beg. Pity from strangers stung worse than hunger. On the third day, she came across a house on the edge of town. A wreck, broken almost beyond repair. The roof sagged, the window shattered, weeds grew taller than the fence. It looked more like ruins than a home, but something about it pulled her in. The realtor laughed when she asked about it. "You sure you want this place, ma'am? It's falling apart. You'd be throwing your money away." But Margaret didn't hesitate. She handed him the last of her savings, every single dollar. When the papers were signed, she stood before the broken house and whispered, "This is mine." That night, she lay on a broken cot she had dragged inside. Rain leaked through the roof. Rats scratched in the corners. The smell of mold clung to her clothes. Yet she whispered to herself, "This is not the end. Not yet." Neighbors passed by, shaking their heads. "Poor thing," they said. "She wasted her last pennies on ruins. She won't survive the winter." But Margaret ignored them. If she could raise 3 children with nothing, she could survive this. She rolled up her sleeves and began cleaning. Rusted nails, rotted boards, dust piled thick in every corner. Her hands bled, her back ached, but the work gave her purpose. Then one afternoon, as she scrubbed the floor, her broom struck something solid. At first, she thought it was a stone, but the sound was hollow, metallic. Heart pounding, she pried up the warped floorboard. Beneath it was a small chest, its iron edges rusted, its lock corroded. Her hands shook as she smashed the lock open with a rock. The chest creaked, dust rising into the air. Inside lay bundles of yellowed papers, leather-bound folders, and at the bottom, rolls of gold coins that shimmered in the faint light. Margaret gasped. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the papers. Deeds, bonds, certificates, all stamped and signed, each worth sums she could hardly comprehend. And the coins, real gold, stacked neatly as if someone had hidden them away long ago. She pressed her hands to her mouth to stifle a sob. After all the humiliation, after being discarded like trash, destiny had hidden a fortune in the very house everyone mocked as worthless. Quietly, Margaret sold a few coins. Enough to fix the roof, repaint the walls, and restore the house. One by one, workers arrived. Neighbors gawked. She must have found help somewhere, they whispered. But Margaret only smiled. She let them guess. Within months, the ruins transformed into a gleaming white house, a garden blooming at its gates. Margaret herself changed too, walking taller, dressing with dignity, her chin lifted high. But she didn't stop at herself. With the wealth she had discovered, over $100 million, she built a foundation to help widows and orphans. "You never know what's hidden in broken places," she told those who asked how she managed it. What she didn't say was that she had rebuilt herself just as she had rebuilt the house. Meanwhile, her children's lives were crumbling. Ethan, hungry for power, invested recklessly and trusted the wrong people. Fraud destroyed his business, leaving him bankrupt and drowning in lawsuits. Claire's picture-perfect marriage collapsed when her husband walked out, unable to bear the mountain of debts. Daniel, the youngest, spiraled into gambling, drinking, and debts owed to dangerous men. By winter, all 3 were shadows of their former selves. With no roof, no money, no friends left to turn to, they thought of only one place to go. It was a Sunday evening when Margaret heard a knock at her gate. Slow, hesitant. She opened it and froze. There they were, Ethan, Claire, and Daniel. Their clothes were torn, their faces hollow, pride stripped away. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The same driveway where they had once thrown her out was now the stage of their surrender. "Mother," Ethan's voice cracked, his arrogance gone. We lost everything." Claire fell to her knees, clutching Margaret's hand. Tears streaming down her face. Daniel couldn't even look at her. Neighbors peeked from their porches, whispering, "Aren't those the same kids who called her dead weight? Now look who's crawling back." Margaret's heart swayed between pain and love. She remembered the sting of betrayal, the cold night at the bus station, the cruel laughter of their friends. But she also remembered their first steps, their childish giggles, the way they once clung to her skirts. She spoke, her voice trembling yet firm. "You cast me out when I was at my weakest, and now here you are at yours." Her children broke down, begging for forgiveness. Tears stained the porch she had rebuilt with her own strength. Margaret sighed deeply, then lifted each of them to their feet. "I am still your mother," she whispered, "and a mother does not turn away her own." She let them in, not to erase the past, but to remind them that true strength is not measured by wealth or status, but by endurance, resilience, and love. The same neighbors who once pitied her now spoke with awe. They called her dead weight, but in the end, she carried more strength than all of them combined. And that is the story of Margaret Wilson. Once discarded and humiliated, she rose higher than anyone ever imagined. She proved that broken places can hold hidden treasures, and that even the deepest betrayals cannot extinguish a mother's love. So I ask you, if you were in her place, would you have let them back in? Or would you have closed the door forever? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, justice, and redemption.